Young Darmok. The wall disappeared at breakfast. One moment it was pale stone, warm with the first light over the eastern terraces. Then a silver line ran from ceiling to floor and the stone dissolved into depth. Clouds rolled beneath the viewpoint. A black spacecraft descended through them. Darmok stopped chewing. His mother did not. The vessel was nothing like the narrow exploration ships of Temeria. It was bulbous at the rear, with 3 uneven structures projecting from its hull. Blue light flickered around it as it descended towards the international field. In one corner floated the 12-sided emblem of the Planetary service. Across the bottom appeared 4 words, TASHANUK and GAMALA at reunion. Darmok swallowed. Darmok, his bowl cooling. His mother did not look at him. He ate. On the wall, hundreds of Temerians stood behind the transparent barriers of the international field. Children sat on shoulders. Planetary guards formed 2 immaculate lines. The alien ship touched the ground. A door opened. Darmok leaned forward. His grandfather, Gigi, entered from the garden carrying a basket of purple tubers. He looked once at the wall. TASHANUK and GAMALA at reunion, he said. But Gigi's voice was different from the announcer's. Slower, satisfied. Darmok understood. This was good. School began with mathematics. Nobody spoke. 12 black blocks sat before Darmok. Beside them were 3 red frames and a flat white board. Teacher Senka touched the board. Symbols appeared. Darmok moved 4 blocks into the first frame, 4 into the second, and then stared at the remaining 4. Across from him, Khalad had already finished. Khalad leaned back. Darmok glared at him. Khalad raised one eyebrow. Darmok put 3 blocks into the final frame. 1 remained. Khalad's mouth twitched. Darmok looked at the board. Then the block. Then Khalad. Khalad made a tiny choking sound. Darmok kicked him under the table. Khalad yelped. 24 children looked up. Teacher Senka slowly turned her head. Silence. She looked at Darmok's 3 frames, then at the solitary block, then at Darmok. Shaka when the walls fell. The class exploded. Even Senka smiled. Darmok dropped his forehead onto the table. Khalad whispered the first 2 notes of the playground song about Shaka's trousers falling down. Darmok kicked him again. This time Senka didn't look around. She merely lifted 1 finger. Darmok stopped. At midday, they fought behind the water garden. It began because Khalad said Darmok's father flew cargo skiffs because he was too frightened to leave Temeria. Darmok said nothing. Khalad smiled. Falor, beneath the closed sky. That did it. Darmok shoved him. Khalad shoved back. They crashed through a row of blue reeds and landed in the shallow water, punching badly and trying much harder to drown each other's uniforms than each other. A circle formed instantly. Darmok and Khalad. Shut up! At the water garden, someone laughed. Khalad grabbed Darmok's collar. Darmok slapped his hand away. Then the circle opened. Teacher Senka stood there. Nobody moved. Water dripped from Darmok's hair. Senka looked at Khalad. Then Darmok. Raka and Toman, before the eastern gate. Every child went silent. Darmok knew that one. Everybody knew that one. 2 brothers had fought while an enemy approached the city. By the time they stopped fighting, the eastern gate was burning. Darmok released Khalad. Khalad looked at the ground. Senka pointed towards school. They walked. Behind her back, Khalad bumped Darmok gently with his shoulder. Darmok bumped him back. Neither smiled. The knock came during history. 3 soft tones sounded at the classroom door. Senka stopped. A man in a grey planetary uniform waited outside. She stepped into the corridor. The door became opaque. Immediately the room filled with whispers. Khalad turned around. Senka! Beyond the door! Someone giggled. Senka and the grey man are... The door cleared. Everyone faced forward. Senka entered. Something had changed. She wasn't crying. That made it worse. She walked to her desk and opened the lowest drawer. She removed her purse, a small family image, and the green stone she always kept beside her teaching board. Nothing else. She closed the drawer. The children watched. Senka looked across the room. Sadiq and Lara at Perina. Silence. Darmok looked at Khalad. Khalad looked at Darmok. Nobody laughed. Darmok had never heard it. Senka gave the class a small nod. Dismissed. She walked out. For several seconds nobody moved. Then everyone spoke at once. What is Perina? Who is Sadiq? Is Lara a child? My brother knows. No, he doesn't. Perina is in the south. It isn't. My Gigi said. Darmok ran after Senka. She was already halfway along the corridor. Teacher! She stopped. Sadiq and Lara at Perina. Senka's face hardened. Darmok waited. Darmok waited. Before the unopened door. He didn't know that one either. Teacher, her voice rose. Darmok, before. The unopened door. He stopped. Senka walked away. At home, Mama was in the garden with Gigi. Darmok dropped his school bag beside the door. Sadiq and Lara at Perina. Mama stopped cutting leaves. Gigi looked up. Darmok saw them look at each other. That was information. Sadiq and Lara at Perina? He repeated, this time questioning. Mama returned to the leaves. Darmok, his hands unwashed. Mama! She pointed towards the basin. Darmok washed his hands furiously. Then he went to Gigi. Sadiq and Lara. Gigi raised a finger. Darmok waited. Gigi carried his basket inside. The Great Wall was showing the international field again. The alien delegation had emerged. They were tall, wrapped in layered yellow fabric, their faces hidden behind translucent masks. TASHANUK and GAMALA at reunion. Gigi watched them. Then he looked at Darmok. Sadiq and Lara at Perina. Darmok's eyes widened. Gigi shook his head. Wrong. He pointed to the alien delegation. TASHANUK and GAMALA at reunion. Then he touched his chest, spread his arms towards the screen and smiled. Welcome. Alliance. Meeting. Darmok knew that. Gigi touched the wall. The broadcast vanished. A library opened. Thousands of images appeared. Gigi moved through them with his hand. Planetary maps, families, battles, harvest machines, explorers. He stopped. An old image filled the wall. 2 Temerians stood beside a primitive silver spacecraft. A man. A woman. Darmok stepped closer. Gigi said nothing. Below the image, Sadiq, Larina. Darmok turned. Gigi was already walking back towards the garden.
Gigi, no answer.
Darmok searched. The wall showed him diagrams. Perina was not a place on Temeria. It was a moon. Far away. Sadiq and Lara had travelled there hundreds of years earlier. One diagram showed their vessel approaching the moon. Another showed something Darmok couldn't understand. A broken circle around the ship, then a series of mathematical panels. There were no words. Numbers were never spoken. Darmok stood silently before the wall and worked through them. Fuel, distance, orbit, something had failed. The next image showed Sadiq alone inside the vessel. The next showed Lara outside. Then there was nothing. Darmok searched again. A painting appeared. Sadiq sat inside the ship with his hand against a window. Beyond it, Lara floated among the stars. Darmok felt cold. Mama stood behind him. He hadn't heard her enter. Sadiq and Lara at Perina, Darmok whispered. This time, his voice fell at the end. Mama put her hand on his shoulder. He understood. Teacher Senka? Mama nodded. Darmok looked back at the painting. Someone had gone. Someone wasn't coming back. The next morning, Senka wasn't at school. A replacement teacher stood at the front. Nobody asked. Khalad sat beside Darmok during the first break. For a while, they watched older children playing in the courtyard. Then Khalad said quietly, Sadiq and Lara at Perina. Darmok nodded. Khalad looked at him, questioning. Darmok drew a small spacecraft in the dust. He drew a moon. He drew 2 figures, then 1. Khalad stared. Oh. They sat without speaking. After a while, Khalad erased the picture with his shoe. That afternoon, mathematics became difficult. The replacement teacher displayed a 12-column problem across the wall. Blocks appeared in layers of 12, then 12 groups of 12, then 12 groups again. Darmok forgot about Senka. He forgot about Perina. He forgot about Khalad. There was only the pattern. He moved 1 block, then another. The entire structure changed. He stopped. Khalad stopped. The replacement teacher looked over. Darmok moved the 3rd block. The columns collapsed into a perfect arrangement. For several seconds, nobody made a sound. The teacher's eyebrows rose. Beneath the opening sky, the class gasped. Darmok grinned. He had never heard that one. But this time he didn't need to. Years passed. Darmok learned thousands. He learned the garden references and the war references. The foolish wanderers shouted across playgrounds, and the sacred ones adults never used lightly. He learned that the same reference spoken upward could be a question, downward a judgment, softly a condolence, sharply a command. He learned the histories behind some. Others he understood perfectly without ever hearing their histories. He learned mathematics in silence. He learned navigation from moving stars across enormous walls. He learned propulsion by standing beside engineers while they dismantled engines. He learned the shapes of hydrogen, iron, and carbon before he knew the stories associated with their discovery. He learned that Temeria was powerful. He learned that power did not require noise. Deep beneath the cities were machines capable of bending light around the world. When danger approached, Temeria could disappear. No broadcasts, no cities, no oceans, only empty space where a civilization had been. But sometimes the cloak opened, sometimes ships departed, sometimes strangers were permitted to land. Every few years the wall at home would dissolve during breakfast, a new vessel would descend through the clouds, a new emblem would appear, a new delegation would walk onto Temerian soil, and underneath would be a reference Darmok had never heard before. He always stopped eating. Mama always told him his bowl was cooling. Gigi grew old. Khalad became an engineer. Darmok looked upward. On the morning Darmok left Temeria, Gigi came to the international field. He walked slowly now. Darmok wore the uniform of planetary exploration. Behind him waited a ship capable of travelling farther than Sadiq or Lara could ever have imagined. Mama embraced him. Papa touched his forehead to Darmok's. Khalad stood farther back and called, "Falor, beneath the closed sky." Darmok laughed. 30 years after their fight in the water garden, Khalad was still calling him a coward. Darmok raised one finger. The old warning. Khalad laughed harder. Then Gigi approached. He looked at Darmok. He looked at the ship. He looked towards the sky. For a moment, Darmok expected some great reference. An explorer, a hero, someone who had crossed darkness and returned carrying friendship. Gigi said none of them. Instead, he touched Darmok's chest. Mama and Papa, with Darmok. Darmok froze, his first words, his first world. Home. Gigi pointed towards the stars. Then opened his hand. Darmok understood. Home was not the opposite of going outward. Home was what made going outward possible. He embraced his grandfather. Then he boarded the ship. Many years later, another strange vessel would appear. Its people would speak in an impossible way. They would know the names of objects, but not the lives inside the names. They would hear everything and understand almost nothing. A captain named Dathon would try. Again, again, again. And eventually, on a lonely world beneath an unfamiliar sun, two people would stand together against something neither could face alone. One would die, one would understand. And somewhere, much later, a Temerian teacher would touch a wall. An image would appear. Two figures. An alien captain beside a fallen Temerian. Children would stare. The teacher would say, "Picard and Dathon at El Adril." Some would understand immediately, some would not. One child would go home and ask Gigi, and the language would grow.